Hi, everyone. Welcome to this Tong Alaap, which will be on backlash and women's struggles to counter what is happening to the rollback on the rights and gender equality in the region. Uh, Backlash is a global phenomenon. It's not happening only in South Asia. We know by 2030, 1 billion women and girls will be worse off. We have seen rollback in women's rights and gender equality gains all over the world. South Asia is a very complex region. So, in this region, we see changes have happened in women's position and well being. We see advancement in health. We see advancement in women's participation in labor force. We see gains made and changes in law and also women's education. But we also simultaneously see high levels of violence against women, both within the domestic sphere and also in the public space, sexual harassment in the workplace. We see also that women, despite being in decision-making position, having less voice and influence over policies being made and being able to influence the popular discourse. Now, the gains that have happened, obviously, state played a role, but women's movement played a critical role. Women's movement in South Asia has a long history. Women were very active in the anti-colonial movement. If you think about Bangladesh, you can think about Pritigata Waddadar. You think about basically writings of Begum Rokeya, who's our feminist icon. There has been that rich history both in India and Pakistan and Nepal. But also at this time, we have also seen localization of different agendas. While we have a rich history of women's movement, currently the region is seeing political shifts. We have seen rise of populist forces both in India, Pakistan. We have seen authoritarian tendencies. Bangladesh just has an uprising. But what is worrying is the shift, right? We have seen women's rights and gender equality being co-opted by popular forces, for example, by BJPs for electoral gain in India. We have seen co-optation of the language. We have seen challenges and loss of space for dissent, partly with the Digital Security Act that we have seen being rolled up in all the countries, and also NGO registration law that limits the right to set. We have seen basically the way backlash actors, those who are co-opting, delegitimizing, stigmatizing activists in specific ways. But there is a commonality also in these strategies. So you see stigmatization of activists specifically, you see direct attack and violence against them, but you also see laws being used to limit the space for activism. So in the project that we will talk about findings that we'll use the findings from, but also discussions around how women are fighting back. This is a project that was a 5-year one funded by ESRC, a research council in the UK. It's called Sustaining Power. We worked in 4 different countries, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, and Pakistan. I have basically representatives from each of the country teams here to talk about the project findings. So basically focusing on the kind of challenge that women's movement is facing, but also how are women fighting back. So my name is Sohela Nazneen. I'm a senior fellow at Institute of Development Studies. My colleagues will introduce themselves and then we will have a discussion around this issue. So my first question to the team here is, what does backlash look like in the specific context that you're working in? And what kind of challenges does it pose for women's rights? So the floor is open. Anyone can jump in to talk about it.
Some of the backlash that you have been asking in the women's rights movement in Nepal is it's not one, it's from a state itself for the women's right that's coming strongly, and also it's on the way as a barrier for the in their progress. Also, it's coming from largely from the community, because there is lots of stigmatization and vilification of the identity itself, and also from what their right is not being served to them. Like they are claiming the spaces, but they are also removing them from that space as well. So that's happening both from the community and the state. Also, the gender-based violence is one certain thing in all the struggles that we work with, because they are talking for the weapons and girls' right, and then the family itself poses violence to the family members or the girls and women's as well as the community. They comes and comment that they are the housebreaker, the community breaker, norms breaker, which is like basically saying that they are going against the society, which is like deeply rooted social norms already existing there, and this as like destroying the formula of the what good community should be. So all the factors where our research work, the family, community, market, and the state, they are coming on their way and creating a backlash to achieve or to clean these spaces that which is desired by the weapons. So these are some of the backlash. We can go case specific, but I'll come to next question.
Sure. Thank you, Nirmala. It's about a backlash at multiple levels by multiple actors, right? And also how norms are used against women. Anyone want to comment on that? Or
As well, if you mentioned, we have similar issues of backlash that you seen, especially delegitimization of the women's struggles. We also have gender norms that are being used to, target women, especially sometimes in very violent ways. We also have intentional inaction, co-option, and also problems of funding. To give few examples, if we talk about violence, we've seen that Adivasi Vikas Manch have had to face a lot of violence within the family, but also the community, where women who stood for political participation were becoming prominent in the leadership space, were targeted, even kidnapped, had to face a lot of violence. And so it's not simply the family, but also the community that uses gender norms. We have a quote from the women there who say that we were told that uh, people who sit and urinate cannot stand for political leadership. So that is the kind of norms. Interestingly, in Samarthan Mahila Sanghatan, we've seen that threat of self-harm by men or the power holders in the community used, that they will self-harm themselves if you protect the women. So use of suicide, for instance, as a threat, that do not take action for the women or a drug, and ask them to return to their family if she's deaf family, because otherwise they will die by suicide, and those kind of threats as well, which really complicates the matter for the Nyaya Samiti that is being run there. And of course, we have the Bharatiya Muslim Mahila Andolan, where, like you said, the populist forces are, that there is an agenda to otherize the Muslim community. And here we find that the Muslim women who had a very long-standing demand of a comprehensive law, they had filed a public interest litigation in the Supreme Court, which was not being answered for the longest time. But we had a government which is Hindu right wing decided to wanted to be seen as the savior of Muslim women and demonize Muslim men, and they passed the law, which was of course piecemeal, and it was celebrated by Bharatiya Muslim Mahila Andolan, although it was just a piecemeal act, not a comprehensive law that they asked for, and faced threats from the community, but also, interestingly, from within the mainstream movement, who saw PAMA as aligning with the right-wing agenda. So these are the kind of the complicated picture that we are seeing in the backlash scenario. Yeah.
And thanks, Mubashira, for drawing attention that the problem is not easy, and it's not always that your actors are very clear in terms of who's doing the pushback, but also talking about how the backlash comes from within your own community at times, and also from other feminist movement actors that we want as allies, and how intersectional identities are so important, because you talked about the Adivasis, you talked about Muslim women in India, and you are at that complex intersection. It's not just women's issues, your other identities tied to, and have you faced the pushback. Um, so I will ask about Bangladesh and what's happening in terms of backlash in Bangladesh.
So, talking about these multiple identities and also the conflicts within the movement, I think it's been very interesting in the cases that we study. For example, on the rape law reform, I think the organizations that are fighting for rape law reform, for greater justice for people who have been raped, on many accounts, on many issues, they have a consensus. But on others, there are divisions, like wider society on the issue of, for example, death sentencing. Not everybody agrees that it's a human rights violation. So they haven't been able to take a very firm stand saying that death sentencing should be removed. Whereas there is a growing consensus that if you ask for death penalty, there's less likelihood of convictions. So there's a debate going on within the movement. There are also debates around how to deal with women's sexuality and women's agency. That, when they enter into sexual relationships, is it always forced, or is it sometimes of their own free will? So, various cultural reasons why people do not want to acknowledge women's agency, even of young people's agency in forming sexual relationships or wanting to get married. So there are cases where young couples have eloped voluntarily, but then later it's treated as rape by the families who are filing cases of kidnapping against the young man who maybe, proposed to their daughter. So there are issues which are not easy to deal with, but there are other issues where we see, there's a consensus that, for example, the evidence laws relating to evidence, character evidence have to be changed. But there we see the backlash from the justice system, from the military, I was going to say, from the medical establishment. For example, there is a ruling that the two-finger test to test whether there has been rape has been made illegal. That it's not a valid medical test, and it's also, you know, uh, it contravenes the privacy and other issues. But the medical establishment still is practicing it because they feel that it is the only means they have to prove rape. Whereas we know that it doesn't really prove rape. So, there's this backlog in practices that something is established in the court, but that doesn't mean that it will translate into implementation. So getting it approved in the law took years and years, but then now getting it implemented seems to be taking even longer.
On the implementation of laws, I remember so keenly. So the Pakistan team's working with a home-based women's workers trade union. It's registered as a trade union, and they've had a lot of success in getting this law passed on recognizing home-based workers as workers, which is great. But on the implementation, what is really interesting that is coming out of that is that the backlash is in terms of intentionally not implementing the act. And how they do that is simply by saying, oh, so they have to obviously be registered, right? Because you have to have an identity card issued as a home-based worker, and that's when you get rights like social protection, social security, insurance, minimum wages, etc. But despite that law being there, the Labour Department has been dragging its feet for nearly a couple of years now, and they just say, oh, we don't have the staff to do this, or we don't have the
To issue the card.
to issue the cards. Well, no, not just to issue the cards, to even like accept registration papers. So what is really happening is, and coming back to what you talked about in terms of the community as home breakers and Laji, I mean, the thing is that, so because these home-based workers have agitated and come out of their homes and said to their families and their communities that actually, no, we are going to be registered. We are, so they've got the law passed, but the community is like, yes, but where are these cards? No, so because of that intentional inaction, every time that, so the entire trade union is sort of vilified, and any members are saying, so the community is putting pressure on, or the families are putting pressure on the women to say, you went out against our permission, against our will. You said there would be an economic, a material gain to this. There has been nothing. Now you say, oh, next time, next time, next time. When is this? And then they are also termed as, oh, they're home breakers. So the trade union has had to face that backlash from the community, from the families, because of this backlash from the state. So also types of backlash are so interrelated. That's really it's not easy. Like you said, it's not easy to disentangle what's going on really.
Can I come in there? Yes, it makes sense. Because this vilification of the trade unions, we saw it when the trade unions were struggling to increase the wages. Right. And then the employers and the country, I mean national level, were saying that you're going to destroy the market for Bangladesh products, that we won't be able to compete with Vietnam and other countries. So if you push up the wages too high, you are going to take away employment of these millions of people. So you are destroying the economy, you're destroying their livelihoods. So, they had to argue back, saying that also using economic terms of that if wages go up, productivity will go up. You can afford to increase the prices by a few cents. It will not cause you to lose the market. And, they had to bring in lots of arguments to be able to justify that, we want to preserve the employment. We want to preserve the sector. We don't want to destroy the sector. So having to justify various, sides of what the consequences.
Yeah. The cool thing about this workers' right and all. In Nepal, it's like land right is everyone's right, which is already ensured by the constitution and the policies. So when there is that right, when they go to claim their rights to the government officials, government themselves are doing a development work which is just in their settlement areas, which is like government has ensured that it's their right, but also the government is doing evictions in the name of development. But the question is again, why they were uh, compared to come and sit in that area. It's because of 15 years long war which has displaced them. It's because of all this humanitarian incidents, and because Nepal is pro to humanitarian things, and also it's also sometime states, in most of the cases a state is responsible for the displacement. They are doing eviction, which has not only affected the present generation but the generation after generation. It is affecting the trauma they get. Even the small children who lives in those settlements, they don't play with this toy of dozer and all the toys, because it's so much ingrained in them that this thing will come and destroy our house and take us away from here, so wipe us away from here. And also older generation are living with that trauma, and it is also passed on the newer generation as not only in the agenda and or not only in the papers, but it's also in their behavior, which is affecting them day by day, and the additional violence and additional discrimination that they have to face from the community is far in the different level, because they are every day said that you are from the Sukumbasi area, you are not cultured, you are involved in the gangs, you are in the drug abuse. Also, your work is most of the women from there are working in the informal sector, so that means they are in the sex workers, they are not respected. So whenever they wear a good clothes, also there are questions. So their whole identity is being questions. IQ said it's interrelated with the state and the company Egypt. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just gonna move you guys to the next bit, but I just want to quickly sum up what we are hearing. So one, of course, it's very clear that backlash is a complex phenomenon, but it's also very clear most of the time when we talk about backlash, we focus on specific episodes that are violent episodes when there's repression or groups are attacked or women are attacked. But apart from that kind of spectacle of violence, like backlash also sort of comes into your everyday aspect of life. What Nirmala ji, you're talking about the landless women who are squatters in informal settlements, right? But it's also about the dimension of the emotions and pain. And that pain goes not just affects this generation, it affects the next generation. But all of you also touched on basically the role of the state. And you think state would be a protector of rights. In some cases, they're not. If it's a co-opted state, it's very difficult. If it's an authoritarian state, it's even more difficult. But it's also about, you guys talked about the narrative strategies, right? If people being labeled, women being labeled in specific ways, and that labeling happens both from the family, from the community, but also by the state afters. And it's also about constructing counter narratives, which Mahinapa, you were talking about, when the garment workers are being labeled for asking for fair wages, then saying that you're destroying the economy, then coming back to counter that becomes very important. So I think we move on to the countering strategies. So the floor is open now in terms of for you guys to reflect on how are women countering this backlash, because it's happening every day, but it's also happening collectively. So feel free to jump in.
The movements have decided to build their own parallel structures which will further the idea of gender justice and feminist values. So we have Samata Mahila Sakatan who have set up Nyay Samitis. They take domestic violence issues, but we have an entire counseling session or actions in the community. That is one setup. Then we have Bharatiya Muslim Mahila Andolan, which set up Sharia Adalats. Sharia Adalats, they're calling it Sharia because they're reinterpreting Islam from a feminist lens, and they train women to become Fazis. Now, that is not heard of in the Muslim community for a Fazi to be a female and to, adjudicate on personal law. So these parallel structures are being created. And also we see that since these are movements that are membership based, there is a constant evoking of this collective power. So when they're challenged by the state or the community, the idea is that we have so many women with us who are seeing this, and this is different from what you have. So the countering of delegitimization is dying through the power of the collective. And we've also seen that the relationships that are built within the movement are so strong, and we saw this during our reflective workshops in the Super project. There is this interpersonal, strong relationship that has been built through sharing of trauma and joy and helping each other and building those support structures within the movement. That is also strengthened. In the face of backlash, they haven't fallen apart, and they have to remain together despite the issues of resources and funding that they have been facing. So, but now they're realizing that building these parallel structures is important, but to counter the co-option or the backlash from the state or even from the community, they need to build alliance with the state to again say that we are legitimate bodies that exist to counter violence in the community.
Multiple strategies to counter.
Yes. As in India, Nepal is also in the same way we are. Our movement actor has been countering the backlashes. It's also backlash. The creation of backlash has made them more challenged, but also they are happy to counter that backlash because they have coming up with the new strategies. One of the strategy is there is a lots of backlash on NGOization in the feminist movement, which has said that if you want to get registered, then you have to be NGO, not otherwise you don't have legitimization of your identity. So what our two of the struggle has did is, like for this quota setup, as I'm speaking for Nepal Mahila Samaj, they have been prioritizing their issue from their own way. But when it comes to, like, sometimes the backlash are from the state and where they cannot raise their voice because they are legitimate, as because they are registered, but they are coming with the NAWHRD, that means National Alliance of Women Human Rights Defenders, which is not registered. So their one of their strategy is being not registered because they can raise the voice for everyone. So they come to this network, that's Alliance of Women Human Rights, and they just go on the demand or create a crowd that will help Nepal with, like, customers to get the or claim the right. So this registering and not registering and the relation between these two networks has really strengthened them, as well as also they are building the alliance with national label women right organization and women lead organization, so that they have lots of people with them whenever there is some issue. So they are coming together where they have a specific issue, and where all the women right and women leadership organization have to support it, and also they can disperse when it's like their one issue and they can take this. So that is one of the strategy that has really proven that this togetherness and this sisterhood and this principle of feminist principles has really worked in our situation. Whereas also these two organizations, Nepal Malakta Samaj and National Alliance of Women Human Rights Defenders, they are training themselves to come in the state level structures. So two organization are capacitating their women right activists, so who can come in municipality level, rural municipality level, especially province level and national level as well. So these all the women who go from these groups are taking the issue of these women's for this women's right movement, either be as a land right, housing right, or gender-based violence, or sex workers' right, or child marriage. So they are taking this issue in different levels. And also one of the beauty of it is, like, as I mentioned, there is an inter-party women's association, which is like we're already the member of this National Alliance of Women Human Rights Defenders. They are they are again coming together as a inter-party women's network, and they discuss their whichever party, it doesn't matter. So they come together and discuss their issues, and then they take this issue in their political parties as well as the state structure when they are already there. So in this way, lots of gain has been able to sustain. So these are the strategy. Although some of the strategies are they are also training the new generation, new young feminist, so that they understand the issue themselves, also get the global national and global idea of feminist issue around the world. So they are getting connected. These young feminists are getting connected with each other's network as well as in the global network, so that when they speak out, they have the same understanding on what they want to speak, what they want. So they have this clear understanding on is it it's human right, women's right, land right. So they have same kind of understanding on the issues. So and also the innovation is there when there is a young people in the group. So not only the our after doing the reflective workshop, our struggle member has also understood that when the street based or advocacy and protest is not enough. They should be strategic. They should build the relation. Agency building is not enough. So they are also working on the relation building and also structural change. So that it facilitates and they can take their rights.
So that's multiple strategies for coordination, right? Yes, both intergenerational, kind of coordination, but it's also getting into the formal structures and having a seat at the table through the inter-party coalition. So you get into the political space, but you're also in local government. And it's also thinking through how do you sustain, right? How do you build capacity to do that? Widening.
God, I just wanted to figure out. I mean, we just say something about the young generation, the young feminists, and the innovation. So in Aurat March is a collect, is a registered entity now. It started in 2018 on Women's Day, but received so much backlash, both physical threats to violence itself. Because women were taking to the streets and occupying this public space, which is not accepted in Pakistan. And one of the things that they have done is used social media. They have also been, social media is not just a site of, like it's not just positive. You have to recognize that there's been a lot of backlash on them, but they've also used social media to kind of re-put out their messages. But what is also interesting is, the use of art and the use of like innovative sort of like, whether it's theater-based, performances, and the NMES has taken up, like forum theaters, for example. But I mean, we see also in our, so in our exhibition, and I hope that we can direct viewers to that, the way in which the Hazara women have, for example, expressed their pain, their anguish, but also their strategy of like, what is their main message? What do they want out of, what is their ideal world, and what are the constraints that they face? And the use of art is so important, both for Aurat March and for the Hazara women struggle in Pakistan, but also I think for all other struggles. And I think this is something that is a really interesting idea of like using art for, for, and popular media, I should say, for activism, for spreading your message. So sorry, I trying to use that always like but
Suppose for a conversation,
as
it's art is there where young feminists are taking like the responsibility for that. But also we are very aware about the vulnerability that young feminists can be exposed. So what one of the strategy what this NAWHRD and Calls Right Forum is doing is like, if there is some kind of incident of GBV or the child marriage, then they are not going directly to the police, because there is again their confidentiality might be breached, or they might be blaming for the reporting the child marriage, so that it would be hard for her family to survive in the community. So what they are doing is like, they, when they know that there is a child marriage in the community, they go to inform to NAWHRD. So these women who are already working for women human rights defenders, they then take this forward to the police and the administration, so that the backlash or the vulnerability that the young feminist might face and then her movement will be stopped is much lesser. So the face is in need of HRD, but the work that is being together, because they are children, they are work adolescent, and they know, right, who is getting married, when it is. So they just take this information to NAWHRD. So this is also to like working together as well as taking their responsibility of the work.
Can I react to that?
Yes.
Because the young feminists, I mean, they're very different groups. But one of the very strong slogans that they brought out in 2021 was that Mukti Chai Rokhanaf. It means we want emancipation, not protection. So there's this tension. Obviously, you feel protective. I don't want them to get hurt. I don't want them to get put off the movement. But they need to take their own risks. And they need to decide on their own strategies and not be held back by our earlier experiences. So that's one thing. Coming back to what you were saying earlier, I was sort of reflecting on our experiences. The trade union movement in Bangladesh has been very divided and very politicized, because all sorts of factions have aligned themselves with political parties and not always representing the workers' interests. So when they were trying to build up the movement to ask for increased wages, it involved a lot of negotiations within the movement to try to come to a common platform. Because earlier, the employers and the government had always said, "Oh, you don't agree," and so they negotiate, and then at the lowest level, because within the movement there wasn't a consensus on how much they should be asking for. So we saw the organizations we were working with. They started about a year and a half ago, before the wage board was to meet, building up this consensus slowly, bringing in other organizations, and also this issue of those who are registered, who are not registered, because some of the more, let's say, movement-based organizations don't get official registration as trade unions. So, but working with those who are registered, with those who are more like-minded, coming to a consensus on what the demand should be. That was a very important strategy. Another thing is, talking about Aurit March and others. A lot of the cases we dealt with have emphasized the need to um, combine both street-based activism with having a seat at the table, sort of policy-based. That your strength when it comes to official spaces will also come from your image of what you're able to do outside. If they don't think that you have a strong enough backing that you can mobilize a few thousand people, carry out demonstrations, be seen, they won't give you that much of importance at the negotiating table.
Yeah. Negotiations, very important. Any final points? Otherwise, I'll move you guys on to the next bit. Anything? Okay, so the next bit is you all talked about different kinds of strategies, right? Some strategies are focused on being in the formal spaces and raising visibility of your agenda, negotiating, pushing. Others are more about coordinating among each other and gathering that collective strength and supporting each other. Much more alliance building, but also internally what you do inside your organization or your coalition. And others are more about how do you represent and illustrate your agenda to a wider constituency, to the public, whether that's being used through visual art or whether that is about street protests and sort of going into the community and illustrating the issues there, right? So many different types of strategies because issues are different. The strength of the organization coalitions are different. Position is different, right? The capacities are different. And the challenge you face from the opposition, null actors, who is opposing your agenda and who's within that basket of actors is different. So let's talk about the current context in South Asia. So we know that South Asia is at a critical juncture. In Bangladesh, obviously, it's very, very critical because negotiations are going on right now in terms of what kind of society and political culture do we want to build. And in India, obviously, you had the recent elections where BJP's dominance have been challenged, but then BJP has been in power for a long time and they have a particular kind of gender agenda. In Pakistan, women's movement has always faced a challenge in terms of being existential. It starts from Zia Haq, right? So you have democracy, dictatorship, but it's always holding that counter public space, as you say, but also they're interacting with the state structures, and there's the Women's Commission and all of it. So using those strategies to remain visible in a very difficult context. In Nepal, although Nirmala ji are talking about difficult contexts, we know that Nepal had a democratic transition in 2005, sort of a post-conflict transition, and you have changed the formal rules and structures as you talked about in terms of the inclusion of women and representation of women, but you also have created formal structures like the inter-party sort of the coalition group that you're talking about, which is much, much more active than in other countries. Your courts function differently. So the democratic norms and consolidation is different, and the opportunities for women are slightly different than other challenging contexts. So given this context, I want to ask each of you got to reflect on where do the opportunities lie. And you can reflect in light of the movements be studied or broadly as you want, but please feel free to come in with where do you see the opportunities for sustaining the gains and countering backlash.
I'll start, maybe. Since Bangladesh is going through a political transition with an interim government, things are very much in a flux. So while this has many threats, this has also many opportunities. So we're talking about, this main demand was to do away with discrimination, a society where there will be no discrimination. Everybody understands this, everybody seems to understand this differently. Everybody has different connotations. We're talking about inclusivity. Here also people have different understandings of inclusivity. But I think it's an opportunity to put forward the women's movement's understanding of discrimination and what kind of discrimination needs to be changed. We're talking about reforming the constitution. There have always been issues from the women's movement with the constitution because it now gives importance to Islam as the state religion. It has said that, it promises equality for men and women in the public sphere and not in the private sphere. So there are fundamental areas. If they're changing other things, then why not try and change this as well? Whether it will be accepted or not is a big question. But at least one can raise these issues. This is an opportunity to raise these issues. Um, One, we're talking about, discrimination. The students' movement was very much focused on employment and quotas and bringing in discrimination there in hiring and retaining staff. Uh, people at various positions. But it's also an opportunity now to say, okay, we might not need quotas to get women into big public universities, but there are other areas where there is still discrimination. So because they're looking into these things in a different way, and different actors are now jockeying for space, it's possible to raise the issues. We're being met with a lot of backlash because not a lot of negativity, but at least there is space to raise these issues. So I think this is an opportunity. And then, we have people in the different commissions, reform commissions that we know that we can approach who are allies. So we have to seize the moment. Whether we can do so is another question.
Seizing the moment. Wants to jump in about seizing the moment. So, in the case of Nepal, there are lots of things already been done. So there are laws, rules, which is a very good opportunity for us to claim our space as well as pressurize the government to get the right what we should get. So that's one of the opportunity that we have. And also, as you mentioned, that it's a fast track court for domestic violence and all. So which is already there. It's just about the mindset that people need to change, and the dominant group or oppressing group who is already there, they have a resistance to change that. So that's the thing, that's the opportunity that we have, that we can move to them and discuss about this thing. Another opportunity is in every department in Nepal, there is a JASI policies, which already ensures that women should be there, women's participation, meaningful participation should be there, and different caste, creeds, religion, that's all should be there. The inclusion is already ensured by the government. It's again comes to the mindset, how we false on it. Other thing is, as Maheen and Deepta is also mentioning, that we have these laws and rules. You want the thing is that how it is being implemented and how people thinks these gender equality and social inclusion is the things from the Western culture, not from ours. So that should be understood over there. Another thing is like the negotiation that we just talk about, that the movement actors are also flexible what government offers. So we have to explore the alternative ways. We will come in the negotiation. We can be in the negotiation on same table, and then let's do what is good for everyone. So that is also the opportunity for the Nepali movements to negotiate with the government. Although what Nepal is advocating is the localization. The resource should be directed directly to the ground level, so that
the movement actors and the feminist movement can really take their agenda because they are the expert of their issues. Not other NGOs and INGOs can just talk about them and then create a funding. They are the one who has already who can express, and they know the best solution for their problem. So this channeling of resources is another thing that Nepal is really focusing on. So we are really working with all these social and feminist movement actors. So localization is one thing that we want to facilitate these resources to channelize for the movement actors. Another last but not the least that I always focus on is creating women's history. Let's write about this. Unless and until there is a history or the written document, then it's the tough fight we are doing it will be more tough. So let's create the history of women's as well, because it's the history is always men doing it. Expected. Mubashira Deepta?
Yeah, awesome. I think you were seizing the moment. You've been having these discussions because of the super project dissemination in India, and uh, there there has been a lot of reflection on how women's movements have realized that there were identities, there were intersectionalities that were ignored, and then there were certain factions or groups that got together and focused on certain identities and built their own movements. And now there is this moment where people are feeling that there is a need to build solidarities across identities, issue based maybe, and but there is this need to strengthen ourselves across separate identities and issues and to come together. And you're seeing this that's happening in the recent past. For instance, Samartha Mahila Pasangatan, which is part of Uttan, is also part of a national level network which is called Matham for the farmers' issues, women farmers' issues. Then we have the Adivasi Vikas Manch, which is part of a network which is called Sushna Evam Rozgar Abhiyan, and they have been really powerful in Rajasthan to bring about certain legal changes and social protection for Adivasis. On and if, the Domestic Workers Network has the National Platform for Domestic Workers, and they have been quite strong in bringing different issues together on domestic workers across the country. Uh, Pama, there has been an issue of alliance building within the women's movement, but they have joined a network which is an international one, which is called Musawa, and that's where they're finding some solidarity and being able to assert. So that's one where network building is happening, and I think the seizing of moment is there. Also, there is this realization that we need to build allies among men and the youth. Often these spaces are exclusively women oriented. So there is this thing about now how we engage with men and how do we include them in our movements. One of our struggles, Adivasi Vikas Manch, they realized this long time back. They've built people's institutions. Astha is the mother organization that built people's institutions. There were women, exclusive women spaces, and the one that we are studying or partnering with is 50-50% membership of women and men. And you're realizing that the experiment of having 50-50% or equal participation of men and women is proving to be more effective in that community because they're building allies with men where they had to protect themselves from violence and that again with the youth, this realization that we need to involve more and more youth. And we've seen that in terms of digital social media intervention, where communication experts are being hired who are younger people who, understand the digital world and the language, and they're communicating or the issues are a little bit more of that. So that's some of the other choice acts. And so important to have allies here, Deepta.
Yeah, so I think I'd like to just zoom out a little bit into terms of like the wider project because I'm not so clear on like what the Pakistan specific opportunities are. But I think what I see across all the four countries are
two things which actually Super was really based on was co-construction and really getting the perspectives and then the voices of the activists themselves into the public domain. And I think, yes, knowledge is power, but whose knowledge counts, whose voice counts in constructing that knowledge. And as you know, we've been using quite a participatory methodology of both collecting data and and making sure that women themselves are able to come together, reflect on their on what are these opportunities and how they can go ahead. And I think so that is something that I see as an opportunity, is the co-construction of knowledge by and the the voices of the participants uh of these activists themselves. And I think the other opportunity I see very much is in terms of this intergenerational and intersectional solidarity building. And we've seen all in all four countries that actually the practice of both the practice of care in building that solidarity, because these are very raw emotions, and as you say, there's a lot of pain and sorrow and loss, and it's not easy to kind of counter backlash. So that the care that is taken both as practice in terms of we have occasions where we've also had people who women who brought in their children, or there are there's group chai care happening, etc., while there are meetings and activism happening, or somebody takes over somebody's cooking responsibilities. Again, in home-based workers, that's what they said, that when they perform meetings, sometimes they kind of just because otherwise they're beaten for not being able to cook at home because they went to a meeting. So there's shared cooking stuff happening. But I think that also the ethos of care as solidarity, in terms of saying that actually there are these feminist principles, and that we we can put together our agendas, and sometimes we fight together and sometimes we fight for our own agenda. And it is grabbing that opportunity and being really flexible, really kind of responsive to those backlash situations that's happening. So I think those are two big things that I really see, is the fact that we need to be very flexible, very careful in our solidarity building. We also really need to bring the voices of those things. And Bopin with Super's done some of that and provided some of those opportunities.
Great. So I'm going to bring the discussion to a close. Thank you all so much for the insightful reflections, both from the countries themselves, but also overall what's happening in the region. Just a few takeaways in terms of what is it that we are getting. One is, of course, we need to not just fight harder, the situation is hard, but we need to fight smarter and we need to be savvier. The other one is, of course, narrative, and how we build narrative is quite important in terms of how we present the agenda, where are we getting the agenda from. It's also building it from the ground up. It's not a top-down thing that it had just a bunch of us sitting around the table. It has a basis on the ground. So how do you connect at multiple levels, both locally, nationally, but there's also the international level in terms of how issues are portrayed and what filters tap. The other bit is, of course, about speaking up and not being afraid to speak up and holding that space. If it is a democracy we are constructing, and democracy is supposed to be gender equal, because that is part of those democratic values and it is part of feminist values also. So how do we made those connections in how we construct an equal society, a political society that works for everybody. And the last bit is, and this is what we heard quite a lot last week at AWID, is if you solve the problem of gender justice, you have to be solved inequality for everyone, because we hold those intersections for class, caste, religion, all the issues that we see in terms of marginalization. And the gender equal society works for not only for women, it works for men, it works for the next generation. So that's very, very solid. That